Pro.
Hello and welcome to ADSR Pro with me, Mike Smith. I'm just going to take you on a quick tour of Midi in Cubase, understanding Midi, routing Midi to, let's say, external devices, sound modules, synthesizers, etc. So if we start with the devices menu in Cubase and click on device setup, here if we click on Midi port setup, here it shows you all your Midi ins and outs. Yours will probably look completely different to this. Basically, I've got connected via USB the Icon Rio Midi 4x4, so that's 4 Midi ins and 4 Midi outs. Also, I have my 828 Mark III, which has its own Midi port on there, so that's showing. My Novation Remote SL, for some reason, shows up with 3 Midi ports. And also USB 2. This is just one of the you can buy these off eBay. It's just a USB with a MIDI in and out port on one end of it. They only cost about £3. They're actually quite handy. Also my Nano Control, Korg Nano Control, shows up there too. So with regards to this, like I say, yours will be different. Maybe you have the Midi Sport, you know, 1, or Midi Sport 2x2, or Midi Sport 4x4, Steinberg Mid X8, you know, whichever one you have, it should effectively show up here. I've obviously renamed some of mine, which you can do in here. So for instance, I've got my access virus onto the Icon Rio. So if you double click, you can rename it. This makes it really handy when you're routing MIDI connections within Cubase. I've also got my XV5080 on port 3. I've got my Orbit 9090, which is on the USB cable that I bought from eBay for a few quid. And that's effectively it for now. So again, what we'll do now, if we go into Cubase and create a MIDI track, initially it comes up as all MIDI inputs. Let's hold that as not connected for now. So what I'm going to do, as opposed to have it come from all MIDI inputs, because it can cause some confusion, especially with my virus, because it loops, you get like a MIDI loop and it goes absolutely nuts. So obviously I'm using my Novation Remote SL as the MIDI trigger. So let's select that, and there you go, you can instantly see that there's a MIDI signal coming in. And now I'm going to send it, let's send it to the Orbit 9090 first. So there you go, that's the Orbit 9090 being triggered via MIDI. Also we could select the access virus. That's the virus there, and the XV5080. So there you go. As you can see, the reason for naming them becomes quite apparent when you can see there's all these different things here. You can actually hide your devices so they don't show up here if they're not in use. Personally, I'm just used to having them all there. But if you wanted to make it a little bit simpler, so the only devices that were connected were visible here, then again go into devices, device setup, and you can actually uncheck them so they're not visible at all. And that really is it in this tutorial. Just for MIDI information. There is a lot more to it, but if you have any questions, I would much prefer it if you were specific. You know, drop me a line and I'll try to answer those questions to the best of my ability. The idea here was to show you roughly just about connecting things up, you know, correctly from the get-go. Makes life a lot easier, especially, again, this relates to the template tutorial, you know. So for instance, we could call this XV5080 and know that that's wired up correctly. Let's create another MIDI track. Again, all MIDI inputs, let's put that to the remote, and we'll send this one to the orbit. I'm going to turn it onto MIDI channel 1 because that's what it transmits on, so we can call that orbit. Let's create another MIDI channel, and let's call this virus, and we'll select from the remote SL. We'll send it to the virus on MIDI channel 1. So now there's the virus, there's the orbit, and there's the XV5080. Again, really useful for your template, because now when my template would open, I know now that all my external devices there are connected straight away. I don't have to mess about or route things. Just making life simple, really, and that's the whole point for me. Is when I open Cubase, I would like it to be as quick and as easy and as effective as possible, just to get going. So again, got any questions, drop me a line, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Until then, bye bye.